Hey, this is Sharon and Juna. Welcome to Crazy Biatch Asians, the YouTube channel. The following audio was recorded for podcast purposes, so there are no visuals for this YouTube video.
Feel free to put down that phone, go for a walk, cook some food, and listen to us chatter for the next little while.
If for some reason you don't want to listen on the YouTube platform, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Now, on to the ep. Hey, welcome to Crazy Biatch Asians. This is a podcast where we discuss the issues Asians can face in the Western world with a critical mind, a bit of healthy debate, and lots of tea. Hosted by Sydney-based digital marketer Sharon Jiang and journalist Juna Zhu.
Hey. On today's episode, we'll be dissecting the cultural myths about mental health within Asian communities, which is often seen as a weakness or a lack of willpower and a disgrace to the family honour. We hope by initiating this conversation, we're able to help destigmatise it and provide some advice for anyone who might be in a tough situation where both their mental health and family values are conflicting.
Just a disclaimer, this episode mentions depression, anxiety, and suicide, which may be triggering for some. If you or someone you know needs help, please know that help is never too far away, regardless of where you're located. If you're in Australia, please reach out to Lifeline, Beyond Blue, and in an emergency, please call 000. If you're in the US, reach out to Mental Health America, or in an emergency, please call 911.
Okay, we couldn't really go another episode without addressing this issue. You hear time and time again about how we need to destigmatize mental health through more conversation and acceptance so people are more willing to seek treatment because they're not seen as crazy or unstable. And it's been great seeing an advancement in the general society about the way we view mental health. However, it goes without saying that in the Asian community, this is a topic that is largely still sensitive, misunderstood, and often disdained. And it's become quite apparent in a time where it has been exacerbated by current global affairs. Hello, the pandemic and anti-Asian hate crimes.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, the situation of how mental health is perceived and dealt with in Asian communities, predominantly those from Southeast Asia, East Asia, and the Indian subcontinent, can be broken down into three distinct points, which are unfortunately strong and persistent. Number 1, mental health is looked down upon. Number 2, Asian parents don't understand that mental illnesses go beyond simply feeling sad. Number 3, Asian parents don't actually know how to talk about it because there's a communication gap. So within Asian cultures, mental illness is often seen as a weakness, a lack of willpower, and even contagious. Asian cultures have hard work and stoicism ingrained into them, and while these are amazing qualities to have, there is often a negative side to it as well. It can make Asian parents quite backwards when it comes to dealing with mental health, which is breeding future generations of mental disorders. It's this idea that you want to keep going despite obvious mental issues because to be hardworking is one of the most treasured Asian values.
Literally this. So Asian parents often think that if you're failing at something, you're basically not trying hard enough.
Yeah.
If you have depressive or suicidal behavior, then you're viewed as just being difficult. It's quite a horrible flaw in the culture.
Yeah, I agree.
But before we go any further, there's a point that was raised in a lot of the online forums and help pages we came across during our research, which I think is really important to note. It's not that Asian parents are bad people or that they don't love you. Most of the time, they are often just confused and maybe even more confused than you are and are probably struggling beneath their strong exterior, which they've been carrying around their whole entire lives.
Yeah.
Also, they don't know how to talk about mental health because they've never had to.
Yeah.
If you think about it, we all learn how to discuss certain topics from our social circles and upbringing, and so a lot of immigrant parents are missing that exposure, experience, and routine of talking about mental health. It's this kind of grey space.
Yes,
But
definitely.
in saying that, we cannot dismiss what it's creating. Unfortunately, the silence around mental health translates into tragic and heartbreaking statistics on a larger scale.
Absolutely. And going into the statistics, I just want to preface, this is where we're going to talk about suicide rates. So if you are particularly triggered, please skip forward. So South Korea has one of the world's highest suicide rates. This is closely followed by Japan, and according to the WHO, it's the leading cause of death in men between the ages of 20 and 44, and women between 15 to 34.
Wow, 15.
I know, that's so young.
God.
And you know what? Surprisingly, China doesn't rank high on WHO's list. However, the issue here is that a lot of the statistics have historically been censored by the government. So it's not quite an accurate reflection of what's really going on, just to keep that in mind for China statistics. Now, moving into the Western world, according to the Office of Minority Health, suicide was the leading cause of death for Asian Americans between the ages of 15 and 17 in 2017. Asian Americans are also among the least likely to receive support for a mental health crisis. And I can only imagine that these stats have risen since the COVID crisis and, of course, the anti-Asian hate crimes. Unfortunately, in Australia, there is very little data on the rate of suicide or mental illnesses amongst young Asian Australians, which just goes to prove how taboo this topic still is in a nation that has a prominent Asian community.
Yeah, all of these stats just keep on bringing it back to one question for me. What do you have to do, and how far do you have to go to justify mental health as a legitimate healthcare issue?
Yeah, totally. And I think largely we're making positive steps towards that. I think mental health advocacy, mental health awareness is getting better.
Definitely.
But, I mean, it can always be improved for sure, especially amongst the Asian community, which is what we're talking about here. So, Juna, I've got a question for you, and I'd like to know your personal take on this.
Okay, shoot.
Why do you think many Asian households don't take mental health seriously?
Oh, okay. Firstly, I think mental health is seen as a very Western concept. So generally, the Western style of parenting is quite independent. They're open to talking about anything with their children, and no topics are really off the cards. Also, I think Asian parents tend to see mental illnesses as black and white, and there's no real spectrum. So it's either a trivial little thing like feeling sad or tired, which is nothing a good meal or a little sleep can't fix, or it's the most extreme scenario they can think of, like you're going crazy.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be seen as weak. You have parents who literally immigrated to a Western world with little to no money in their pockets, worked so incredibly hard to provide a life for you and to pay for tutoring and music lessons so you won't have to live the same life as them. So as that dutiful child, you want to do your parents proud. You carry around this constant guilt, and you just want to be perfect 110% of the time, and anything less is you doing a disservice to them and piling shame on your family's honor.
Yeah, I get you.
I was actually watching the show New Amsterdam a few weeks ago. It's on Netflix, and it basically sums up this entire situation. I think anyone who has watched the show and is listening now would know exactly which episode I'm talking about, because it was really quite a confronting one. So I think it was episode 8, if anyone wants a reference and wants to watch it. But basically the preface of the episode was there was this young Asian American woman by the name of Amy, and she goes to the hospital with her mum because she's been suffering from migraines. Now the doctor refers her to a psychiatrist after medication doesn't help, saying that the migraines may be stress induced. But the mother refuses to accept that this is the case, saying that Amy's headaches are not due to stress. And on the way home, Amy ends up jumping in front of a train and ends up back at the ER.
Oh my God.
She's in the ER and still her mum doesn't believe that it's stress induced or has anything to do with the family pressures. And Amy has to work with the doctors to find a way to get her the help she needs without going against her mother's wishes.
Yeah,
I would highly recommend watching it because it just was a real shock to the system that this is really happening. This is a real life situation.
Yeah. It does reflect perhaps a lot of Asian families out there.
Yeah.
I haven't watched that scene, but like listening to you talk about it, I could like feel Amy's frustration and exasperation. Like my heart was beating so fast when you were talking about it. You can really empathize with her in that way.
Now, what about you, Shaz? What's your take on it?
I definitely agree that Asian parents are probably not well versed in mental health issues because, like you said earlier, that wasn't a focus in their upbringing. I don't want to make this an excuse, but many Asian parents grew up in relative poverty, so their main focus was putting food on the table. So mental health really wasn't a thing. So firstly, they don't know what it means, and secondly, they don't understand the point of a psychologist.
Yeah.
I think there's the rhetoric in Asian families that if you speak to a counselor, you're either spilling family secrets or super personal details to a stranger.
That's a really good point.
They find the concept of a stranger understanding you better than yourself or your family somewhat strange. And because Asian communities tend to be very communal with a strong focus on family, many Asian parents might think, how is this random stranger going to help you?
That kind of sums it up perfectly. I know that we are both really high achievers. So we've both really felt the brink of stress and anxiety and even burnout. And Shaz, I know you have done the most amazing thing recently.
God, don't talk it
Honestly,
up.
I bow down to you for this. And I think this really needs to be spoken about now.
Yeah, so I want to speak a little bit about my personal experience to break down the stigma more and perhaps encourage people to seek help if you need it. I think largely I'm very lucky to be surrounded by friends, both Asian and otherwise, who are very open to the idea of therapy. And I kind of want to spread that mindset through this episode today. So I've actually been seeing a psychologist for my anxiety because it's something I've been feeling abnormally for the last couple of months or maybe even years, but I just never got it checked out. I think genetically I'm quite predisposed to anxious feelings.
Yes.
And recently it's just kind of crossed over into dangerous anxiety. I've always wanted to talk to a professional about certain life situations, but I somehow thought the process to get help was really complex in Australia. And before I go into the next part, I really want to preface that I am not a healthcare provider or a professional. So please do your research, as the information I'm about to say now may have changed by the time you're listening. We can also link some government resources in the show notes that are up to date. So in Australia, for young people, you have something called a mental health plan. So you go to the GP and they do a brief assessment of your feelings. You basically have to answer a questionnaire and rank where you see yourself. Then the GP refers you to a psychologist. So you can either choose your own or they can recommend one. You then get up to 10 sessions that are subsidised by the Australian government through Medicare. So the sessions aren't free, but they're generally around half price, but the pricing changes depending on place to place. I think due to COVID, you can now get up to 20 sessions, but please, please, please check that with your health provider. And honestly, it's as simple as that. I honestly never got help because I thought the process was way more complex and more time consuming than that.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to get too much into why I'm seeing a psychologist because this episode will be way too long. But I do want to share why it's important to get professional help if and when you need it. So I've read quite a lot about human behavior, and after seeing a psych, I am slowly learning about the human brain. And again, I want to preface, I'm not a professional. But what I've learned is many of our actions, behaviors, and our mindset is subconscious, and it's influenced by our upbringing, by our environment, genetic factors, and perhaps big traumatic events that come around in your life. We can will ourselves to stop feeling anxious or depressed, but our brain simply prevents us from doing so. So when I get anxiety, my heart starts beating really fast and I feel like a flood of negative or intrusive emotions, but simply saying, stop feeling anxious does not help.
Yeah.
It's like telling someone who's angry to calm down. Like, emotions don't work like that. And that's because it's all in your brain wiring and you must work to change that wiring. And the point of a psychologist for me is really to make sense of what I'm feeling and help me minimize my anxiety. In my past sessions, my therapist has explained the science of what's happening with my brain and how different modes of therapy can help rewire my thinking patterns. Often humans aren't taught to really dissect our emotions. There wasn't a subject in school called how to be a human or how to communicate effectively.
If only.
Exactly, if only. So for an example, Anger is often a cover for deeper emotions such as humiliation, frustration, hopelessness, etc., etc. And without professional guidance, perhaps you won't know how to unpack that anger and thus treat it or minimize it. So ultimately for me, my therapist is helping me change my thinking patterns and responses to past trauma, while also giving me practical tips on how to minimize and deal with my anxiety. So, what I really want to stress after this long ass spiel, if we have any Asian parents listening, or if you have Asian parents and don't know how to explain why you're seeing a psychologist, I really want to stress this. Therapy is about the human brain, and there are professionals who have studied this part of the body at length. That is what their uni degree is for. And sometimes you need a professional to help you figure it out. Just like how you see a doctor for physical pain, a psychologist is there for your mental health. So normal folk don't have the knowledge to prescribe medicine or perform surgery, so why should we expect normal citizens to know exactly how to cure themselves of mental illnesses, no matter how small or severe?
Exactly. Girl!
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. That was such a long spiel, but
Oh my god, you summed that up perfectly.
I now want to know your perspective, because I know you have worked in the health media space, and there's been times where you've said to me that you want to go see a psychologist as well. So what's your take on all this?
Okay, before I dive in, I just want to say what you are doing is so incredibly brave, and it's really not easy to talk about it openly and on a podcast where other people are going to be listening about your story.
Yes.
That is something brave.
Hi, Mom.
Now, about my story, before I go into things, I just want to say that this is a topic I feel so extremely uncomfortable talking about. So I really hope people can resonate with what I say.
Yeah.
But for me, I have struggled with perfectionism for as long as I can remember. And I've always been known to be quite a highly anxious and stressful person. You can ask any of my friends and family. My family, if they're listening, will probably be like, yes, she's a very stressful person.
I think we're very similar on that respect.
Yeah. And like I said, I really dislike talking about my problems or feelings because it just makes me uncomfortable, and I feel like I'm a massive burden on others if I do share my emotions. Like, why should I put that on them? That it's not their problem. It's better to just tell people you're feeling great, and then you can dwell on your feelings by yourself in your own time. And I think it's a very Asian way of thinking. You have this strong exterior, so everything looks perfect from the outside. And I think I've almost perfected looking happy 100% of the time, when really that's not reality.
Yeah.
So of course, this kind of mindset does generate a lot of negative self-talk and racing thoughts at night. I know both of us suffer from insomnia.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
So I've always associated seeing a psychologist with having problems or because you're crazy. It's like a couple going to couples therapy. Why do they go? Because there are obviously problems in that relationship. But it was only when I started to interview a lot of psychologists for articles I was writing for work did it really occur to me that seeing one is and should be just as important as going to the gym.
Yeah.
So why do we work out? To get strong and fit.
Totally.
So why should we go see a psychologist? To get mentally strong and fit.
Yeah.
It's just shifting your mentality and seeing it as a positive thing.
Totally agree with that.
I think I'm stuck in the same boat as a lot of people. I know the importance of seeing a psychologist, but there is still that initial fear of going to one. And exposing your deepest thoughts is incredibly daunting for someone who normally bottles everything up. Plus, what would my parents think?
And that's why we're doing this episode.
And yes.
Yes.
Like, I still haven't even talked to my parents about it.
Yeah.
And again, it's a cost thing too.
Yeah.
It's not cheap.
Totally.
I would much prefer to spend that money on saving for a property or, you know, putting that towards something than paying for therapy sessions where I don't know if that's going to have a good outcome or not. And some people in my life won't even approve of it.
But then that's why there's a mental health plan.
Yes, exactly.
So look that up, guys. There is a mental health plan.
Again, it is an investment. And I
Yeah.
think it's just, again, shifting your mentality to know that
Totally.
it's worth it.
The question is sort of, is it my priority?
Yes, exactly.
Am I going to make it a priority?
Yes. Talking to more friends who are seeing psychologists like you, Shaz, really helps to bring things into perspective and normalize the way we talk about going to therapy. And I guess that's why we all need to start having these honest and open conversations. And I'm still in the learning process of changing my mentality. So slowly but surely, I will get there in the end. But if we could just become a world where it was seen as abnormal if you didn't see one, that would just be amazing.
Absolutely. I would love to live in a society where it is just the norm that you see a therapist. Just like how you see a doctor, you know, how you see your personal trainer.
Yes, exactly.
Having a therapist should just be a normal thing. And I get your mindset. You're on your own journey to change that. And that's a wonderful thing. It's just a personal thing. And I applaud you for opening up about your mindset as well.
Hide in shame.
But going off of what you said about associating seeing a psych with having problems, I think that stigma is changing. And if it's not, then, you know, we're having this conversation to somewhat shift it in the right direction. I do think everyone can benefit from seeing a therapist, even if it's just for a brief period of time. You don't have to see them until the day that you die. But even if it's for a couple of months, 1 year, it's good to better understand yourself and your own feelings. So I don't even think you need to have bad anxiety or depression to see someone.
No.
It could just be to talk through a situation that didn't sit well with you, whether it's, you know, with someone close to you in the workplace, or if you had a very sort of marked event happen in your life, or if you want to chat through relationship problems. Because what I've also learned through my personal therapy journey is that a psych can actually give you better ways of communicating with your partner, with your parents, with your friends, ways that can actually achieve a positive outcome.
We've said it once and we'll say it again. The single most important thing you can do to help destigmatize mental health and increase empathy between you and your family is to have these open and honest conversations. And we get it. You're either thinking there is no way your parents will ever understand you, no matter how hard you try, or you've already attempted to talk to your parents about your current mental state and they've shunned you. Either way, it is daunting. However, it's powerful.
Absolutely. Look, we are definitely no experts here who can give advice on how to do this. So there is an incredibly helpful article on Self where Pakistani therapist Isra Nasir breaks it down into 8 steps. Each point is actually quite informative and goes into a lot of depth. So we'll pop the link into the show notes so you can really get a grasp on how to tackle each step.
Yeah, we're just going to touch on each one, so definitely read it.
Yeah, definitely.
So number 1, understand why you want to have this conversation. So she advises discussing the following questions with a close friend or someone you trust before having the discussion with your family. So questions will be like, what do I hope it will achieve? Am I seeking a behavioral change in my parents and family or acceptance? Will this make things worse for me or will it improve my circumstances? Will I be able to tolerate their potential inability to understand this? And how can I strengthen my emotional support resources in the event that things change within my family?
Or amazing questions.
Hard-hitting ones.
Hard-hitting ones, but definitely have a think about that.
Yeah.
Number 2, come prepared with information, examples, and descriptions that will be familiar to them.
Yeah.
You want to make sure to schedule in a time to have an important discussion so they too can come mentally prepared. Do not just spring it on them because they see mental health as a Western concept. Please do some research beforehand. One thing you can try is coming with examples of public personalities from your own cultural background who have spoken about their own mental health issues.
Yeah, like there are heaps of K-pop stars who have come out.
Absolutely.
Celebrities. Do your research. Number 3, fold mental health discussions into conversations about current affairs. So unfortunately, there are a lot of horrific events happening across the globe right now. So you can ask your family how they're coping. So for example, instead of asking, does X event make you feel bad or worried? Ask them, what bothers or worries you about X event. So this will help them understand that it's okay to normalize the concepts of emotional health, stress, anxiety, and the lot.
Yeah.
It would also help them understand that you're always open to talking about their emotional experiences too.
It's a two-way street.
Yes.
Okay, I love that point. Number 4, use I statements to help get your point across. So, I statements are a non-defensive and non-blaming way to open up a conversation. From the top of my head, some examples might be, I feel hurt when you comment on my grades because it makes me feel insecure about my career. Or, I feel distressed when you only talk about the negatives and not my achievements because it makes me feel bad about the person I am.
Yeah. Number 5, be prepared to answer questions. So Nasir says, many parents may internalize your mental health struggles as their fault. Others might default to problem-solving mode using religious frameworks. Be prepared to respond to their statements and questions, then give them time to process what they heard and learned.
Yeah, very important one there. Number 6, practice. Because what does practice make?
Progress, not perfection.
Nice! I love that. So this conversation is going to bring up a lot of intense emotions and reactions. So to help prepare yourself, have mock conversations with a close friend or your therapist if you have one. The more you practice, the more control you'll have over your emotions and the conversation.
Yes, I love that. Number 7, think about how you extricate yourself if the conversation isn't respectful. So there's a good chance that things might become heated, aggressive, or disrespectful. So be prepared to have a sound exit strategy if this does happen. So some examples that you can use include, I want to help you understand, but I can't talk to you about this if you raise your voice.
Yeah.
Or you can say, let's take a break until things cool down and we've both had time to process this.
Yes, definitely very important to have an exit strategy. So, number 8, do what you can to prioritize your own mental health in big or small ways. So it's not an easy discussion to have, and you might follow all these steps, but it might not have the desired outcome. So it's really important you create and stick to a self-care plan by finding things that make you feel grounded and supported.
Yeah.
So Juna, what are some of your self-care methods that you like?
Oh, okay. So I love going for a walk
Yes.
to clear my head. And I also love going for runs, but again, that's not everyone's thing. So I read this great article and they suggested that on your notes application on your phone, write down a list of all the hotlines, the contact people that you can reach out to. So if you're ever feeling a lot of pressure or stress, or you just need someone to talk to, you know where to go. That is your page of notes.
I love that.
Yeah.
That is a really good one. And I'm going to go home and I'm going to make this notes up myself.
What about you, Shaz?
Personally, for me, I think exercise and meditation helps. I know that it is so common to have people say that, but sometimes when I'm anxious, I'll just YouTube 15-minute anxiety guided meditation and just sit on my couch and follow the voice, and it actually really, really helps.
I really need to learn from you because I am one of those people who try meditation and really dislike it.
I mean, whatever works for you, because I think walking can also be a form of meditation.
Yes.
And I know there's YouTube videos for walking meditations, and those are great.
There's also running meditation.
Well, there you go. So because this is such a heavy topic and we didn't cover half of what we wanted to talk about, we'd actually love to do another episode down the track, but actually speak to an Asian psychologist. We're conscious of the fact that we are talking about mental health, however, neither of us actually have a professional background in it. So if you have any questions you'd love answered by an expert, please just DM or email us. Of course, you can 100% remain anonymous, but perhaps your questions will help so many others out there who might be wanting the same answers.
I am so glad we covered this topic because honestly, even if you don't talk about it openly, you can probably relate to it in some way or another. And I know for both of us, opening up about our own experiences was an extremely difficult task. It's very confrontational, but we knew that if we prompted this discussion, then it may help others, even if it's just one person, to go and seek help or continue the conversation with someone else.
Absolutely. What we really wanted with this episode is to break down the stigma around mental health in the Asian community, because we have noticed that it is quite a big issue, especially for the older generation. I know the younger generation are paving the way towards positivity, so go team.
And with everything happening on in this world at the moment,
100%,
super
100%.
important.
We cannot stress enough how important it is to see someone if you need help. If you're in Australia, reach out to Lifeline, Beyond Blue, and in an emergency, call 000. And do have a think about the mental health plan, because that is definitely available. If you're in the US, reach out to Mental Health America, or in an emergency, please call 911. If you're located somewhere else in the world, there are definitely hotlines in your area which you can find online.
Yeah, and that brings us to the end of another episode. So if you'd love to hear more from us, please subscribe to Crazy Biatch Asians on your favorite podcast app. And if you've got a sec, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts so we can keep going.
And if you like watching your podcast, you can also find us on YouTube under the same name. And if you want a daily dose of the best Asian memes, then just head to our Instagram at Crazy Biatch Asians.
And on that note, sending love to you all, and please take care of yourselves. Bye.